Seeing as I decided to see Pet Sematary before Shazam, I wouldn't be able to get to it until the following week. And also that following week, the new Hellboy was released. So, what better idea than to see both of them in the same day, inspiring me to do my first ever double review. Now, I was actually planning on seeing both of them in the same day, even posting this photo of both tickets, but we got dogged by the Cineplex website. They always have like early advanced screenings on the Wednesday before the Thursday, and the first ticket available for purchase on the website was for a Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. Anyway, long story short, I saw Hellboy the following day. Now, both of these movies can't be compared in terms of their characterizations or plot, but it did spawn an idea for a specific double review due to some of the themes in both movies. So let's get into it. Seeing as both of these movies have been out for some bit, I will not be recapping that much about the plots, but just know that this video will contain spoilers for both. So if you haven't seen Shazam yet, I recommend seeing it before watching this. If you haven't seen Hellboy, then be sure to watch Hellboy. Now to get started, I'll be going over my pros of Shazam. So I was an absolute Grinch leading up to this movie. I thought the trailers looked too wacky and too silly, and I put off seeing it by nearly a week. And so within the first few minutes of the movie, I had already been completely won over. Expecting some silly kids movie where the lead superhero flosses, I expected the movie to be 2 hours of misery.
I be flossing, I be flossing.
But right from the get-go, this movie starts off with a very dark scene of the main villain, Dr. Savannah, as a child, driving somewhere with his dad and older brother, and the cinematography feels very Tim Burton Batman-esque. And both the dad and brother are giving Lil Savannah shit like they actually hate him. Proper disdain. Savannah is then transported to a magical throne room in another dimension or something, to which the previous Shazam is waiting to find the next person worthy to be the next Shazam. He's tested and proven unworthy and then sent back to the car. And it's just like, so you start your film off with some bullying, then being told you're not good enough. Then to top it off, you're all disorientated from being in another dimension with a wizard. His dad and brother start giving him shit over that too. Then he flips out, causing his dad to crash the car and nearly die. That's your opening scene. It starts off with the kid who becomes the main villain later seeing his dad laying on the ground covered in blood. Well, not covered in blood, but still, that's what it looked like. And holy shit, then the movie starts. Then we get to our main character, Billy Batson, who's playing silly buggers with some cops, and then breaks into the car, and then tracks down the names of his long-lost mother in Philadelphia. Then we get his flashback origin. He was at the carnival with his mother when he was just a tiny kid. Then they make their way through the crowd, and he gets separated from his mother. And then he never sees her again. And it's just like, Jesus Christ, and this movie will be darker and funnier than Hellboy? But more on that later. And it's funny, after a decade of 80s nostalgia, Stranger Things, It, Super 8, retro 80s kids films on adventures with dark themes, all praised for being like E.T. or The Goonies, but purely out of homage sake only. This is the first movie I've seen that legit captures the dark themes of those old school movies without me seeing the obvious references. It's like it just wasn't afraid to avoid being a squeaky, toothless kids movie. Now, I've expressed my distaste in Annabelle creation in the past, but this David F. Sandberg, coming from a horror background, is adding to the new theory that horror directors are built for superhero movies. Sam Raimi nailed Spider-Man, Del Toro made the best Blade movie, also figured out how to make Hellboy work, until they forgot how to later. James Wan's entire career had been horror. Makes a movie about a fruity fish man superhero, makes $1 billion. Surely there's more examples. Oh yeah, how could I forget about the best possible director of any superhero? So continuing the point of dark themes in this movie, after Billy Batson's setup with moving in with a new foster family, we then get caught up with the adult Dr. Savannah, who has spent his whole life researching how to get back to the magical temple and steal the power that was offered to him when he was a child. And he does just that. Take something powerful away from old man Shazam. And alongside one of the walls are all these monsters frozen in stone, and they all represent the 7 deadly sins. And Dr. Savannah awakens all of them, and they all break out of their rock prisons. And no joke, they all were awesome looking gross monsters, which full on reminded me of the Hell Dogs from Ghostbusters. And with a smidge of the Fleabag brothers from Spawn. And every time the 7 Deadly Sin monsters were on screen, they were so good looking that I sometimes couldn't tell if they were CGI or legit practical animatronics. So Dr. Sivana's first order of business as a supervillain, rock up to his dad's successful company building to prove to him and his punk brother that what he saw in the car all those years ago was real. His dad is now bound to a wheelchair due to the car accident. And yeah, how would a superhero movie targeted at kids in this day and age handle a scene like this? I don't know, probably just set it up and then cut away before the bad stuff. But in this movie, Sivana throws his brother out of the window of a high-rise building and then lets the 7 Deadly Sins eat the rest of the board members and drags it out just so you feel the impact. And then he lets one of them just flat out murder his father. Then the movie sort of gets into its superhero comedy groove for the most part, but a genuinely heartbreaking scene happens later on with Billy reuniting with his mum, but I'll cover that later. But yeah, it's good that this movie just had the guts to go dark when necessary. Not in a way that makes the movie original or fresh, but more that it perfectly stands by all the 80s and 90s kids movies that I grew up with, like Small Soldiers.
Time to blast the horn.
Or even E.T.
Maybe an elf or a leprechaun.
It was nothing like that, penis breath!
Elliot! Sit down.
Yeah, Shazam gets 3 points for dark themes. Oh yeah, there's a point system in this super double special review, so get used to that. So now we have the second highly praised and successful DC film following the Great Depression, which is just proving that there's nothing wrong with solo setup movies that can have dark themes but overall just be an enjoyable adventure. We can get dark and violent later. These are the setups and those are the payoffs. I used to think the DCEU was now a lost cause with their title characters like Batman and Superman out of the picture, like literally out of the picture. But you know what? The MCU would have loved to have started off with Spider-Man and the X-Men, but they took lesser known characters like Captain America and Thor and made them just as popular as a Spider-Man or a Wolverine. I think the DCEU can build themselves up with these new characters that wouldn't have been anyone's first choice. Shazam can now work as a Superman replacement, maybe bring in Nightwing as a Batman replacement. With fresh takes on these characters post-Justice League with new directors, I think I'm more hopeful now. Also, it's great when you add a Power Rangers element. Aquaman was full-blown Power Rangers where they're fully colourful suits and wacky monsters. Now, I'm guessing in the Shazam comic book, all of Billy's friends become other multicoloured Shazams, but I didn't know that going into this. So in this movie, when it had already won me over, bam, everyone becomes a Power Ranger. And it's great. Racial diversity, multicolored costumes, fighting unique and wacky monsters. That's how you win me over, DC. That's how you win me over. 10 points for Shazam. Now, for my pros of Hellboy. So just like Shazam, this movie features a variety of different types of monsters. We have trolls and a vampire bat. One of the leading characters transforms into a were-jaguar at the end. There's this cool looking witch creature in a house on chicken legs and she's been like crippled. There's also like this warthog man. And while watching the movie I was like, man, I know that voice. That's not Stephen Graham, is it? And then once the end credits started, I was right. Stephen Graham is an incredible actor who plays this amazing and tragic character in the movie and TV series This Is England. I recommend everyone go check that out. It's great that he's getting these Hollywood roles now, but they're still sort of like too small for him. He's like a voice in this, and he plays one of the pirate crew members in the recent Pirates of the Caribbean movies, but it's good to see him getting more exposure. And other pros of Hellboy. Now before I sound like I'm blindly praising Shazam, I do have one big con with it, and this is it. So I'm probably going to get a lot of shit for this opinion, but my channel, do what I want. I thoroughly enjoyed most of the aspects of this movie, the comedy, the action, the creature effects, the dark and serious moments, but the one problem that sticks out to me is, I didn't for 1 second buy that this guy is the same person as this kid. The biggest reason why I had no interest in this movie is Zachary Levi's performance as the adult version of Billy Batson. Don't get me wrong, it's still a good performance as someone who transformed from a kid to a grown-up within a second, but just not this kid. I started noticing the performance was a bit off the more the Shazam scenes went on. Now Billy was set up like a lone wolf, keeps to himself, has a bit of maturity with trying to locate his long lost mother, and refuses to stay with the foster family. But my main problem is, once he's Shazam, it's like he's this overexcited moron.
Superpowers, dude? I don't even know how to pee in this thing. You're dead.
Oh, hey, what's up? I'm a superhero.
But that's not to say his performance is unwatchable. I just started getting a little frustrated as it kept straying away from the Billy performance. And I was getting invested in his story. Him getting used to the new foster family, fitting in at school. Then he becomes Shazam and it's just like, whoa, what's up? Totally, I'm a grown-up, dude. Also, it doesn't help that the actor looks exactly like Jimmy Fallon. And the reason I hated the trailers is because they all just look like a big Jimmy Fallon sketch.
As far as I know. Abrams! Let's not talk about that accident.
Now, all of this would have been fine, but as I mentioned before, there's a scene where he finally gets reunited with his long-lost mother, and she essentially tells him that she wanted to lose him in the crowd, so she didn't have to have the responsibility of raising him, which, you know, is pretty heavy shit. And the scene has this miserable ending where he just like sort of has to walk away from her and accept the fact that his mother is a bitch. And I thought to myself, next time he becomes Shazam, I better see what just happened on his face. This is a very significant scene that will deeply impact this character. And once he becomes Shazam again, I don't want to see, hey, what's up? I'm a superhero. What? But that's exactly what happened. And I was a bit disappointed. I just wanted to see Shazam not acting wacky and over the top after that scene. My theory is that while Zachary Levi was watching the other kid be all energetic, he was just trying to match that. But it sort of lost connection to the actual Billy character. Like, in a way, he's just acting like the grown-up version of Freddy. But during the end fight when Shazam gets them all to hold the staff so they can all become Shazams, watching Freddy's reaction to finally becoming a superhero, after spending his whole life obsessing over comics and superpowers, I genuinely believe that that was the adult version of him in that moment. And it was great finally getting to see that character get what he wanted. And the adult actor who portrayed him did it very well. But that's just probably just nitpicking on my behalf. But I am keen to see a Shazam sequel. But it's just, in the next movie, I don't want to see this whole, what up, I'm totally an adult superhero, what's going on there? I just don't want to see that shtick. It served its purpose in this movie, but I want to see Shazam grow up as much as Billy was. Now, for my cons on Hellboy, here we go. So, I never, ever thought I would see a mess as worthy as Transformers: The Last Night. I'm pretty sure I hated this movie. There are no scenes I remember enjoying. And this is something that's shocking. This movie felt so overstuffed with so many ideas. But not just little scenes where characters just get to say something. No, this movie is overstuffed with expensive things. It's like every single scene has a fight scene. Just a scene where Hellboy walks into a room, fights a bunch of people, and then they exchange some exposition. Then on to more fight scenes. But only hearing that the movie had a budget of $50 million, it's like, wow, they made that budget stretch to terrible, terrible lengths. This adaptation of Hellboy is apparently a few different comic books put into the one story, and my god, it felt that. This movie has no singular identity, it has no natural flow, but this is the annoying thing about blockbusters these days. They have to plug in so many elements because of expectation. Transformers: The Last Night was guilty of that. When the movie should just be about an evil Cybertron floating towards Earth and our characters have to deal with that, what do we get? King Arthur and Merlin the Magician, Stranger Things, Knights, Nazi Hunters, Suicide Squad, some more junk, ends with Hell on Earth. So Hellboy 2019. Well, it starts off with King Arthur and Merlin the Magician, Mexican wrestling with a vampire, Knights, trolls, Nazis, fighting a witch in a chicken house, pigman fight, and also Hell on Earth. Walking out of this movie, I couldn't get over how much was just shoved into this movie, and not only did any of it have any chance to breathe, neither did I. Apparently there was constant clashing with the producers and the director over the vision of this movie. And yeah, this movie's horrific runtime of 2 hours felt 2 hours longer than Shazam, which had a healthy pace. There's this whole extended scene with some crippled witch in a crusty house that's on chicken legs. This whole scene had great set dressing, a complex fight scene, and it wasn't short either. But when you look at the movie as a whole, it was all so pointless, and I cannot, for the life of me, remember what was learnt by the end of that scene. Like, it was probably just a bit of information about the final villain. But it's probably in one of the Hellboy comic books. But it is so pointless in the movie. It felt like it should have been a sequel thing. Something this movie reminded me of is the 90s Judge Dredd movie with Stallone. Alright, we're adapting an obscure comic book that not everyone knows about. Alright, what do we put in from the comic books? How about everything? ABC Warrior Robot, The Long Walk, The Angel Gang, The Rico Clone Arc. Ah, thank God we got all the goods out of the way. So now all that's left is Judge Death. Oh wait, the movie tanked and will never get a sequel, and probably tainted its perfect reboot successor in the future, which no one went to see, which was so small in scale that it could have wonderfully paved the way for all of those stories in sequels. Also, as overstuffed as this movie is, guess what it couldn't deliver on? The goddamn ending they set up. The trailers teased hell on earth, monsters all over the city, global destruction, Hellboy riding a dragon. Yeah, and like all of that happens in 10 minutes. And they did the dirty, the worst, laziest get out of jail free card bullshit plot point. Flip the switch or kill the villain and all the monsters die. Hellboy kills Alice and all the monsters just get sucked back into hell. Fuck! And seeing as the first Hellboy movie teases full demon Hellboy and resolves that quickly, you would think if they were going to do that again, maybe make him do something. Nah, demon mode Hellboy for a little bit. Back to normal. At least in the first movie, the payoff was the actual use of his demon mode, with sticking his hand in that big shrine thing to summon the gods, because that was what he was born for. In this movie, he just swings around Excalibur, King Arthur's sword, and yep, done. But that's just how the plot and pacing was bad. How about the tone? Right off the bat, this movie starts off with a flashback of the Resident Evil Blood Queen. It's all black and white, and then the first line uttered from the new Dr. Broom is something like, "Back in the fucking olden times." And sitting in the cinema, I was just like, uh-oh. Then everything becomes all speed up, slow down, and badass and cute. This movie's tone is like Michael Bay, Zack Snyder, John Woo, and a jury of moronic teenagers got together and wrote a Bible on badassery. And then this movie followed that Bible. The amount of shit in this movie that is just in there for the sake of being killed. And it's ridiculous. This movie is rated R18 in my country. And when we went to see it, some teenagers were like getting kicked out because they were under 18. I don't know if that's the same in other countries, but after the movie, my only thoughts were this movie was so stupid, clunky, and juvenile that only 15-year-olds with the attention span of lightning would enjoy it. But only adults can get in. So like, doesn't matter how much gore is in this movie. If other countries are 18 and older, then yeah, your foreign box office is fucked. And you get to see it in the marketing. Legendary AF. Legendary as fuck. And that's just the worst. All the trailers just had these wacky music choices and made it seem like it's a Guardians of the Galaxy or a Deadpool. Now I don't want to go on a Del Toro nostalgia goggle rant, but before any fans of the comic book start trying to tell me, hey, the movie had this in it, and it had that in it, therefore, it's good. Dope. I'm sure as hell certain that Del Toro loved the Hellboy comic book and also worked very closely with Mike Mignola, and even if he approved the first two Hellboy movies, then I know what I'm enjoying is faithful to the comic books. Now that being said, the character of Hellboy is that though he's been alive since the 40s, he still has like a teenager's personality because he ages slowly. Ron Perlman's portrayal kept that perfectly subtle, but you know, he was still an adult for the most part. Where in this version of Hellboy, he's the fucking Nirvana, emo, bitchy teenage version. And my god, this Hellboy is constantly complaining about everything. Almost to the point of being self-referential, in the vein of Deadpool.
I need some ID, love.
Are you serious?
Does it do anything special?
Yeah, it smashes things real good. Who you calling monster, pal? You look in the mirror recently?
Also, remember when I said I had issues with Zachary Levi's portrayal of Shazam being a bit off? Man, David Harbour could not cooperate with that makeup. Just the mouth was constantly frozen like that shitty remake of Freddy Krueger.
I had to keep you awake long enough, so when you finally slept, you'd never wake up again.
Are you serious? Some dads get their kids Legos.
Unconsciously, you chose a name that was belligerent. Where were you nurtured?
And if you really look closely at a few scenes of him laying on his face, you can actually see the horn stumps shift on his head. And it's like, yeah, how cool is obvious prosthetics? And on top of this, the great heartwarming Dr. Broom from the original, wonderfully portrayed by John Hurt. In this, he's played by Ian McShane, who, I swear to God, plays his arsehole dad character from Hot Rod. Spoilers, he dies at one point during the movie, and then at the end, when Hellboy needs some guidance, he appears in ghost form. Essentially a ghost form. And is like, son, stop being a little bitch, and be a man. Be yourself. Stop being a pussy. Some weird moral speech that can't be humble, because, like, you know, we can't show our feelings.
He's an asshole.
It was like Papa Manta's death scene in Aquaman.
Get out of here! I got this!
Shut up, I'm not leaving you.
Hey, hey! You need to live so you can kill that son of a bitch!
Another great aspect of Shazam is that there are so many jokes aimed towards grown-ups. In a kid's movie like this, where a kid can magically transform into an adult in an instant, there's the obvious things that you would try, like buying alcohol, posing as your friend's father to get him out of school for the day. But would you ever expect going into a strip club to be one of them? Shazam goes into a strip club just to see what it's like, and later on there's this amazing reprisal of the strip club joke. This movie knew exactly what it wanted to be, and I give full praise to David F. Sandberg. I still don't like his Annabelle movie, but there isn't much you can do with a stupid, scary doll gimmick when it's not even the doll that's the threat. But I think he's well fitted for the superhero genre. I reckon his career is going to boom from here on out. As a horror director, he knows how to make the audience jump, laugh, go nuts at all the right moments. All the characters felt grounded, with their own issues to deal with. You really grow to like them, and when they all become Shazams at the end, it's one of the greatest feelings. Shazam was an absolute pleasure to watch. All nitpicks aside, I highly recommend it, and would gladly see a sequel. I give it the full $6.50 out of $6.50. So I was against a Hellboy reboot, ever since they announced it 5 minutes after Del Toro and Ron Perlman announced that they'd given up on a third movie. And my reaction to the trailers were, what was the point? I was expecting something darker and grittier, maybe a bit more serious, but at the very least, be fun. But nah, this movie tries to deliver too much junk with no substance or heart. $0 out of $6.50. I actually regret spending my money on this. The whole time I was watching, I just kept wishing I was watching the first movie. Del Toro loves all the characters he puts on screen. I don't know who loved this Hellboy. Clearly no one. There will be no franchise after this. It's bombing financially and critically. Yeah, complete misfire. It's just a massive panic movie. Too much at once. No clear vision. So I think it's interesting watching these two movies back to back in the same week. Both aimed to please with the dumb popcorn humour. One nailed it and showed a lot of heart, as well as being a solid original standalone movie. The other was riding too much on, you'll find this funny and badass and cute. I think out of this comparison it proves that sometimes an original new character can shine better than a remake. Shazam is such a weird character to sell people on, and with no cinematic predecessor, it really defied all odds. Hellboy just has that reboot stigma. Reboots just don't really have any discipline these days. It's like that awkward Spider-Man reboot series. They were panic remakes that were trying to please the fans in terms of funny Spider-Man as well as be a bit more realistic, but they just ended up being hot messes. I guess this movie tries to add a bit more of a gore and violence factor that maybe the original Hellboy series was lacking. But reboots will always have to prove themselves worthy of a retelling. Batman Begins was a perfect example of this. We are starting again, going in a direction no one expected, but it took its time to build and craft itself. This is just a case where the previous series just ran out of steam and the studios didn't trust it. But Shazam took its time, even kept the story smaller scaled and grounded. Now it has perfectly set itself up for a bigger world to play in. So to round up all the points, Shazam, 100 points, Shazam wins. Shazam's great. As for Hellboy, well...
You're fucking nuts!